Well guys, back with a new video on the FX Maverick. This time on how I tune the dual regulator setup. But you probably know this already because you saw the thumbnail and clicked the link of the video. Whatever. Ever since I released the unboxing video of the FX Maverick, I got some questions from people. How do you tune the dual regulator setup? Why do we even need a dual regulator setup? And where is the gauge for the second regulator? Well, before we dive into the technical part of this video, I will explain those questions a little bit. For those of you who know already all kinds of those things, please go ahead, skip here in time for the technical part of the video. To start explaining this, we'll have to start with the innovations of the power plenum. Like the FX Maverick has an 89cc power plenum on board, which is massive by the way. The big advantage of this is it allows us to shoot heavier and bigger projectiles like slugs much easier than ever before. Another great advantage of this is that we can shoot our normal ammunition at much lower regulator pressures, resulting in a better shot count and much more relaxed shooting gun. All sounds fantastic, but there is just one little drawback. We have 250 bar in our bottle and our regulator is set to about 90 or 100 bar. That's a lot of work for just one little regulator to handle, to bring the pressure from 250 all the way down to 100, causing prematurely running out or wearing over time, causing creep and inconsistencies. So that's why FX came up with the innovation of a dual regulator setup. Both of them sharing the workload, working half as hard and resulting in a much more consistent gun. So the first regulator is set about 30 bar higher than the second one, so they work together, bringing the pressure from 250 down to 100 or to whatever you have set your gun to. Some people also noticed that there is just one regulator gauge at the back reading the pressure of the second regulator. And they are wondering why there is no gauge for the first regulator. How do we have to see what kind of pressure our first regulator is set to? Well, we all know that those teeny tiny gauges, none two of them are reading exactly the same. And we know they can be a little bit off by a few bars sometimes. So they opted to use just one gauge to read both regulators. How do you see the pressure of the first regulator on your gauge at the back? It's very simple. By bypassing your second regulator, the gauge at the back will start reading the pressure of the first regulator. Right, there are many different ways how to tune the dual regulator setup. I'm just going to show you the way how I do it. What I want to do is I want to bring up the power a little bit so I can be ready to shoot some 30 caliber hybrid slugs once I get my hands on them. I don't know exactly what kind of regulator pressure I need to achieve the velocities of about 930 feet per second. So what I will do is I will bypass my second regulator so that my gauge at the back starts reading the pressure of my first regulator. Then I'll use the adjustment screw of the first regulator to determine what kind of pressure I need to set my second regulator. Once I know this, I will up the first regulator about 30 bar. Then I will depressurize the system. I'll screw in my adjustment screw, I pressurize everything again, then I set my second regulator to the pressure we have determined with our first regulator, and we're off to the races. I will also fine-tune the hammer spring a little bit and I'll show you how to max it out. All sounds maybe a little bit confusing and complicated, but when you see the video you will see it's actually quite simple. Right, let's do this. So, here we are ready to tune the brand new FX Maverick. My first and favorite thing to do is to go out and shoot them of course, but when the weather doesn't allow it like today, tinkering with them and tuning them is my second favorite thing to do. This one is already very accurate straight out of the box as you could see in my previous video, but I would like to fine tune it a little bit, bring the power up so I can be ready to shoot some 30 caliber hybrid slugs once I get my hands on them. First thing I would like to do with this tune before I start messing with the regulators is to max out my hammer spring. You can of course do this by putting the hammer wheel on adjustment, put a 1.5mm Allen key inside and max it out that way. But for the purpose of this video I will take the power wheel completely off, show you the internals, set it like this to maximum and put it back together before we start the tune. Right, first thing you gotta do, take it out of the chassis. So one screw at the back and one screw at the front, and gently slide it out of the chassis. Then let me turn it around to give you a little bit better camera angle from the other side. Then you take a 2.5mm Allen wrench, undo the screw in the middle of the power wheel. Make sure you hold the power wheel because there is a small ball bearing behind it and you don't want to lose that. Also make sure you know on which power level you took the power wheel off so you can put it back in exactly the right spot afterwards. That's a small ball bearing, make sure you don't lose it. There's also a little spring inside, take care of that so you don't lose that as well. Then slide out the internal part like this. Then let me make some room here. This is that little internal part. That little tiny screw here on the end, by screwing this in or out with the adjustment screw. So if you put the wheel on adjustment, you stick your Allen key inside and it corresponds with that little screw here. Screwing that little screw in will decrease your hammer spring setting and screwing it out will increase your hammer spring setting. The length that this little screw sticks out from its housing is very crucial. The maximum length this can stick out to reach your maximum hammer spring is about 6mm. So let's take some measurement reference here. The block itself is 16mm, so we can only have 22mm in complete total length. My starting length is 19.76, so we can go out a few mil. Screwing this out will increase my hammer spring 20.88. $22.10, just a little bit too far. $21.70, it's a little game. $86. $22.03. So the block itself 1606, 1604 plus 6 mil equals 22. Why is this very crucial? Once you go out too far and past the maximum, you won't be able to cock the Maverick again. So next thing to do, put it back into the housing. Now this little thing can go in only one way. You have the little bolt here that can slot into that groove, so it can only go in one way, just like this. Take the tiny ball bearing. I use a little bit of grease to make sure it sticks in. Like this. My hammer wheel was on power setting number 7. Thread it in a couple of turns. Make sure it's on number 7. Put it in, hold it down. Turn in the screw all the way and make sure the ball bearing is in place and it clicks nicely. Perfect. And then now I can quickly put the chassis back on so we can continue with the tune. Now, the way how I like to tune it, there are several different ways and all of them are equally as good, I think. But since I don't know what kind of pressure I need to push my pallet to a particular speed, I like to use my first regulator to determine the pressure that I will have to set my second regulator to. In order for the gauge at the back to read the pressure of the first regulator, we'll have to bypass the second one first. The way how to do this is by putting the adjustment screw inside here, turning it out flush to the body there. And then the gauge at the back will read the pressure of the first regulator. Let me quickly put it on a bipod for you. So bipod is on. And now at this point you can stick your 2.5mm Allen wrench into the adjustment screw, and we're going to start turning it counterclockwise very slowly and adjust it out until it's flush with the body. Just like so. Now that we have bypassed the second regulator by adjusting the adjustment screw all the way out flush with the body, you can see that the gauge at the back is reading the regulator pressure of the first regulator. With this done and the second regulator completely bypassed, we can get over to the bench and use the adjustment screw of the first regulator to determine the regulator pressure I need on the second regulator for the velocities I'm looking for. Right, let's get to the bench. Right, quick few shots. As you could see, a little bit too hot for my liking. The first shots were at 940, 945. It's not really what I was looking for. So I brought the regulator down with about 5 bar and I brought the hammer spring down to setting number 5. It's then that I saw the velocities I was more or less looking for, 930 feet per second. So now that I know that I need about 135 bar on my second regulator to achieve these velocities, I also know that I have to set this one about 20 to 30 bar higher for the dual regulator system to work properly. How I'm going to do this? I'm going to take a little piece of painter's tape and I'm going to mark off exactly where I have set it now. Then I will take my 2.5mm Allen wrench, put it in the adjustment hole, counterclockwise, raise it to about 20 to 30 bar higher. In my case I will have to go to 160. It's about 150, 160. Next thing we gotta do is to bleed the complete system from all the air. Now that we have determined what kind of pressure we need for our second regulator, we can screw in the adjustment screw, but we have to make sure there is no air in the system, otherwise we will ruin the regulator by adjusting the adjustment screw inwards. So the first thing you gotta do, take your bottle off, put it to the side. Then I dry fire it. And let all the air escape out of the system. Once all the air is out and you have verified that it's completely empty, maybe a bit difficult to see on the camera, but I can see it's completely empty and on zero, you can take your 2.5mm Allen key and put it in the adjustment screw. Screw it in, you won't feel any resistance. Screw it in till you feel some
slight resistance, there it is, just quarter of a turn backwards. And then you can go ahead and reconnect your bottle. As I mentioned before, make sure you have enough air in your tank so you don't get misled on reading the information on your gauge. Then let me turn it around. Now it's time to set our second regulator to the pressure we have determined before. Let's see if I can stick my Allen key inside. Go counterclockwise. Just like this. We're right at the mark that we have made with our painter's tape. Okay, now that we have successfully determined our regulator pressure for the second regulator with the first one and set both of them, I will leave that little piece of painter's tape still on, because probably when I go to the bench, shoot it a few times and the regulator settles, I will have to readjust that regulator a little bit. Also, I will fine tune the hammer spring a little bit to get the best efficiency out of it. Alright, let's go to the bench. Well, pretty happy with that tune. I didn't spend too much time on it, I didn't have to adjust anything, just went out to the bench and shot a few shots. And as you could see, settling in at 930, 935 feet per second. Pretty consistent as well, with two shots that were a little bit off. Maybe it's a bad pellet or a false reading of my chronograph. But after all, I'm shooting this 30 caliber at 900 and something feet per second down in my basement, and my pellet trap is only 1.5–2 meters away from me. Right. We're finished down here in the basement. Let's go back up and wrap up this video.
Okay guys, let's wrap up this video with the final conclusion. Tuning the FX Maverick dual regulator setup is a little bit different than what we're used to from other FX rifles. But it's not that difficult, as you could see. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel so I can keep it growing and going. I thank you for watching and I hope to see you back in the next one. Bye.